with me now we have Mr. Theodore Zeldin, Oxford scholar, historian and philosopher, perhaps giving us some insight to the way the society here in the UK might be feeling since those results came in. Mr. Zeldin, firstly, are you surprised that Leave took it?
I'm not surprised because we knew that it would be very equal. But what strikes me is that the lessons from it are being asked only in terms of politics, and they don't see that sufficiently that this is the failure of politics.
Indeed, a lot of people looking, at the resignation of David Cameron, who might replace him. But as you say, one thing that's become very clear in these results, it was 52 for Leave. It's a very sharp divide, a nation divided. How does one go about repairing that? Well,
the democratic system allows 17 million people to tell 16 million people to shut up. And it also says that the important thing is who is Prime Minister and what laws we pass. But we know that laws are never fully implemented. And we know that the real priorities of people now are the welfare of their families, their friendships, their personal concerns, and above all the idea that they are not listened to. The reason why people voted against mainly was they felt that nobody in Brussels ever talked to them, listened to them, or anything at all. Do you believe it? People did vote in relation to the EU, or do you think they were looking more at a local political level, like it was a protest vote almost against the government in power? It is a protest vote, not against anything, a protest vote of discontent in general. Life is not going well. Only 11% of British people think there is progress. So we don't expect anything. We don't know where to go. But they all know that somebody said to me, what has Europe done for me? But no one has done anything for me. Well, perhaps that's part of the campaigns where they went wrong. We had the two campaigns. For Remain, it was basically don't leap into the unknown, the void. For the Leave, it was be courageous, go for independence, we can do this alone. Yes. How do you see it breaking down? Was it more a vote for those who believed in freedom and strength, or was it more people wanting to pull up the drawbridge and protect themselves? No, I think it is a feeling of not knowing what to do. And I think one of the big concerns which nobody mentioned was the fact of the people are not satisfied with their work, how they spend the whole day, which is becoming more and more stressful, more and more pressure at work in every profession. Every profession is in crisis. So people really calling for an overhaul of our entire systems in that way. And that's why I feel that this is not just a sad day, which it is, but also a hopeful day, because it'll force people with luck to say, well, this system just doesn't work. It's ridiculous that in a family, half the people are told that they don't count, their opinion doesn't count. But what's the alternative? The alternative is to do what has been done in the physical sciences. We no longer say this is a table, we say this is composed of many molecules. And the world is composed of individuals, and each one wants to be listened to. And each one wants to have personal relations. On a political level, because this is politics, how would that work? You can't pick and choose. Politics. This is only the politics that's been adopted. And I might say it is a misrepresentation of what Athenian Greek democracy was. The Greeks did not want the winner to take all. They said everybody must be satisfied. In this vote, how would everyone be satisfied? Because there was a clear, a lot of people that wanted no connection to the EU. The UK has got a number of opt-outs from the EU. So in a way one could say, well, we're a member, but we opt out, we have a veto. Would that not appeal to everybody? It looks like it doesn't. Well, it can't, because nobody knows anything about Europe. And England is Britain is the most ignorant of all the European countries about Europe. And so it is all about misinformation and mistrust. And the politicians have discredited themselves by telling lies, and everybody knows they were telling lies to each other. Well, and for a long time, governments both on the Conservative and the Labour side used to blame everything more or less on Brussels. And so people are disgusted by the system, and therefore there is a piece of hope. And but the UK, it can't go backwards now. It can't rejoin the EU. No, but this question is not which nation you belong to. I mean, it is possible now to belong to several nations, to feel sympathy for many different nations. Nations were only started quite recently, and the idea that they will last forever is not tenable. And what other forms of loyalty? And many people now feel more attachment to their football team than to their nation.
And
the nation is approved of because it makes losers feel that they're winners. When we win a football match, everybody has won the football match, but we're normally losers.
Now, we just heard, from one of the main campaigners for the Leave side, Boris Johnson. He's saying that that vote to leave the EU doesn't make Brits any less European or any less united. Is that the way you see it? Or do you think, because when we think of Britain's relationship with the EU, we think of Winston Churchill, we're with Europe, not of it. Do you think that mentality persists today?
Well, Boris Johnson is saying what he has to say, that we all, after you win an election, you say, I am the president of all the country, which you obviously are not. And he's got to say contradictory things. And this campaign was full of contradictions. And people did not know where they were going. It was emotional. It was an expression of emotion, not of political theory, and not of constitutions. And the great failing of Europe was that it did not inspire love. Nobody loves Europe. And nobody says they want to die for Europe. And
do you think the EU can turn that around? You say there's hope, that systems here in the UK can be overhauled. Do you think the EU will wake up now and, if you like, smell the coffee of what we're seeing as rising Euroscepticism across the bloc?
Well, I think it has to be done in a much more decentralized way. And I think the initiative has to come from work. Work is where you spend most of your time. And if you cannot make your work and your family give you the support that you want, you're never going to get anything else, and that is what matters most. And I therefore want to do it in a very minute way. And I wrote a book about this recently, showing how I've tried to carry out experiments. You won't get it right. The great mistake of the politicians is they promise things. Their promises are never kept.
So they
you do experiments, you do it scientifically. You try it out, it doesn't work. You do it 10 times and it still doesn't work, but you enjoy it.
Okay, well, so it's that work-life balance. If politicians we're hearing find the system to give that proper, healthy work-life balance to people, we might all stick together.
We might.
Okay, Mr. Theodore Zeldin, thanks so much for your time. That brings us to the end of this special edition of Talking Europe, brought to you from London. Welcome back to this special edition of Talking Europe, brought to you from London. We're looking in the first half of the show of the possible future for the UK and the EU with MPs and MEPs. Now we're joined by one man who was campaigning to remain, Mr. Stanley Johnson, your chairman for Environmentalists for Europe. I can you're still wearing the Remain t-shirt.
Yeah, normally I would have taken it off, but we were up all night, and so I'm afraid I'm wearing a t-shirt for 2 days running.
That's quite all right. It was a long night here between Thursday to Friday, as you say, nail-biting, but the Leave took it. It is your son, the former Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, who's celebrating this morning.
That is true. That is true, and I have just listened to his press conference, which I've got to tell you was a completely statesmanlike performance. My view is this: yes, as you say, Eve, we fought to remain. And I particularly fought as chairman of Environmentalists for Europe to try to make sure that all the good environmental things which the EU has done, air pollution, water pollution, solid waste, noise, nature protection, which is where I'm wearing something here saying
2020
Remain for Nature, particularly, as I was telling you yesterday, the Natura 2000 network of protected areas. We want to be sure that all those still get protected. We wanted them, of course, to be part of the part of the reasons for staying in. Well, we lost that, so now I am focusing on the idea of being absolutely sure that we don't lose these things in the follow-up.
Because that's the big question. When we look at the two campaigns, Leave, it was very much it's a jump into the void. And how much concretely has the EU ever done for the UK that the UK couldn't have done itself?
On the environment, it's done an awful lot. I mean, we would not have clean beaches. I think there's something like 690 clean beaches which are now up to water quality standards as worked out. I'm not going to say laid down by Brussels, because this was a collective effort to define the standards. Beaches, air pollution. Look at London's air pollution. Bad, bad. But it would be much worse if they did not have the pressure of the European Commission and the European Court. Well, we're not going to have that any longer. So we now have to find other ways of handling UK environmental problems.
That would be your...
in cooperation with.
Because as you say, the environment is certainly one thing that does cross borders. It possibly wasn't the element, though, that was foremost on voters' minds as they went to cast their ballots.
You're absolutely right.
What do you think,
Well, the elements which are foremost in people's minds, and truth to tell, I give credit to my oldest son. He did, and we may not, some of you may not like the outcome. I personally am not going to complain. When 32 million people in Britain debate something for 2 years and then come to a conclusion, I say this is the democratic process in operation. So I'm not going to quibble with the conclusion, but some people might. So my view is that yes, we didn't win on that one, and the other issues he put on the table were important issues. The immigration issue was important, and I, for example, do believe that if the EU had shown a little bit more flexibility and thought of the possibility, say, of adding a sub-paragraph to Article 45 of the treaty, which deals with the movement, free movement, if it had said, look, actually, we'll have a second paragraph which said, and member states may, under certain circumstances, introduce their own domestic measures without prejudice to the principles of this article.
The emergency break that David Cameron got for 7 years,
he didn't get an emergency break.
Well, for a period of 7 years, he could limit social welfare benefits to EU workers.
Break. What he did not get was the right to control immigration. He got the right to vary welfare benefits and so on. And I just think that it's not just for the UK. I just think there are countries around Europe who would have benefited from a little bit more flexibility in the interpretation of Article 45. Well, those days, that's gone now.
But when you look, a lot of people are saying, are these immigrants to the UK necessarily a bad thing? They pay more in taxes than they take in benefits.
It's sheer numbers. Do you know what we are now? We have had, in the last 10 years, 4 or 5 million extra people in this country. Not all, by the way.
But how many people have left Britain as well?
Oh no, I'm talking about net population increase. Now, that's not all from immigration. I mean, the births. I mean, basically, population, as you know, is
around the world.
Births,
going on,
deaths,
increasing.
Plus or minus immigration. That's how you calculate. But there's no way this country can handle that sort of thing. If France had population density levels the same as we have, you would have 100 million people extra in France. That is reality.
So something had to change. But will leaving the EU actually reduce immigration?
This is a very good point. The people who voted for Brexit, and I tell you, I wasn't one of them, will need to insist that actually they do something now. And that means that they will have to make some proposals. I mean, they have talked...
Non-EU immigration was higher in the last year than EU immigration.
It was roughly speaking 50-50, but as you say, higher on the non-EU side. But basically what they have said, I shouldn't say we, I mean they have said they want to introduce something like an Australian points-based system. Something like that. Well, this is the point. Immigration played very hard. And I say we would have avoided all that if there had been a little bit more flexibility in Europe and we had thought of the chances of finding a European solution.
So it's a bit not having a voice, not feeling that voice is heard on a European level.
It's going to be difficult now.
Yeah, future relationship,
it's going to be
that's
difficult
the question.
now. There are some areas where, I just mentioned the environment, where, okay, there will be the nature protection, and some of these will still say protected, but you won't have the legal protection which you have through being a member of the EU. You can't go to the European Court of Justice, for example, once you're out of the...
Yeah, you have to trust. But that's what they wanted. They wanted national sovereignty and to be able to rely on the people in the area to rule the area.
I know. Well, there you go. I suppose I spent too many years in Brussels, too many years...
Indeed, a former MEP for the Conservative Party, you've seen the inner workings.
I suppose my mentality is maybe too much dirigiste. No wonder dirigiste is a French word.
But tell me, how do you feel, we saw in the early hours after the results of that vote, we saw the pound just plummet the lowest level since 1985. Is that a short term? Economically, will the UK prosper outside the EU?
That was just smart businessmen, taking their profits. They've been talking up the pound and they probably pocketed billions.
So outside the EU, do you think the UK economically will prosper as well?
Good heavens,
it's a big market.
Good heavens, yes. I mean, we are a big, we are a great trading nation, and actually, even on on the services side, which is what we mainly make our money in, the common market, the single market, is largely incomplete as far as services is concerned.
So you think the EU needs the UK almost as much? It can't be so harsh, because there was an element of, well, we might punish Britain if they leave.
Yes, I read that.
We don't want a domino effect.
That was the German finance minister, Mr.
Schäuble. Yeah.
I can't get his name right. Schäuble. Well, I don't think he meant it seriously, because moments later, the German BDI said, look, there's no question of any tariffs on British cars or German cars or whatever.
Well, I guess it'll be the years ahead of those negotiations that will tell us how it goes. But here in the UK, a lot of eyes now looking at the national government and how that might repair itself as the Conservative Party split down the line, and who might be the next Prime Minister. A lot of eyes on your son.
Well, happily, I don't have a comment on this beyond saying there is a procedure. Nice bureaucratic procedure. As a bureaucrat, as an ex-bureaucrat, I'm perfectly happy to recall it. 2 members of Parliament have to be selected by the body of Conservative members of Parliament, and those 2 members of Parliament are then presented to all the Conservative members in the country, and there are actually rather fewer than there used to be. I think it's about 100,000 now. So my line is this: in attracting 17.5 million votes, Brexit, and in taking a leadership role in that, my line is that Boris has certainly earned his place on the shortlist.
Absolutely. We'll have to wait a couple more days, perhaps weeks, to see exactly who will be that next Prime Minister. Mr. Stanley Johnson, thanks so much for taking time out again to tell us a bit more of how you feel about it. I feel that you're still quite hopeful, even though you're sad your side didn't win, still hopeful for the future.
That is my nature. I'm a kind of Panglossian.
Okay, well, we're going to speak a bit more of perhaps the philosophical reasons. I'm up all night as well, finding it hard to speak at this stage, but looking at the reasons behind that vote in just a few minutes. Mr. Johnson, thanks again.